Welcome, everybody. It's HQ Spotlight. Mike Morgan, Chris Hassel. We're with you for the next 2 hours. And to our left, Brad Botkin, Ashley, Nicole Moss. Two people that have been ultra busy here in less than 24 hours.
Yes, they have. You just got off the podcast, Triple Threat, and now here in studio once again for a busy day of NBA free agency once again. And the Milwaukee Bucks. Really interesting stuff here. They go out and they steal Miles Turner away from the Indiana Pacers. He was the #1 ranked free agent, according to Brad Botkin at CBSSports.com. But I thought this was interesting. Before the move, the Bucks were 19-1 to win the title. After the move, Brad, 23-1.
The people know. The people know.
So we are giving each team that has been involved in free agency a grade 24 hours in. Brad, what would your grade be? F?
F. This is such a desperate move by the Bucks. This is unbelievable. I'll tell you who Damian Lillard needs to get in touch with is Bobby Bonilla. He is going to be getting paid. Bobby Bonilla, when he was on that contract with the Mets, was getting paid $1 million a year for 25 years, wasn't even playing. That's what Damian Lillard, in a cash-strapped era, all we talk about on all these shows is everybody pinching every penny they can to get below tax thresholds, to get below all that stuff. And the Bucks go out and sign Damian Lillard for $22.5 million over the next 5 years, and he's not even going to play for them, so that they can bring in Miles Turner, who, yes, he was the #1 player on my free agent list, but let's qualify this properly. Extremely thin class. Extremely thin class. Miles Turner's been on the trade block for the last half decade. No takers. Okay, so a little bit of recency bias. They just went to the finals, played well, fine. Little bit better Brook Lopez. That's what you just got. You lost Brook Lopez to the Clippers. You got a little bit better Brook Lopez and Miles Turner. Stretch center, rim protector, not an all-star player. Honestly, I guess they're better. The 19-1 maybe should have gone to like 18.5-1. But the long-term ramifications of paying Damian Lillard $22 million a year for the next 5 years is crippling. Crippling. And the only reason you do this is to be able to outfit your roster in a way that will keep Giannis Antetokounmpo happy. They have no bullets to fire. They are financially hamstrung from here until eternity for a player that they don't even have on their team anymore, all for a non-all-star center. This is so desperate. The Bucks have done 3 increasingly desperate moves to keep Giannis happy. First, they went and got Drew Holiday, traded a bundle for him, ended up being worth it. They won a title. Then they got a little bit more desperate when the Giannis rumbling started, and they actually traded for Damian Lillard. Compromised defense, but he's still Damian Lillard. Now they waived Damian Lillard and still paying him $113 million for Miles Turner. It has got increasingly desperate with every move, and this one is bad. This is a terrible move. F is not even low enough. It's like what I should have gotten in Spanish in high school, like a G. This is so bad.
I'm not as upset as Brad is, clearly.
So bad.
I probably would lower this to a C. This was, in hindsight, thinking about it, because I did give him an F to start with. But I actually think that Miles Turner is a lot better than Brad's kind of explaining. I think that, especially coming off of the season that he had, I mean, you go through it, almost 16 points, 6.5 rebounds in 30 minutes of play. He's a great two-way contributor. When you talk about what he was able to do last season, 100 block shots, 100 three-pointers, 50 steals. The only other players to do that, Brook Lopez, Victor Wembanyama, and Jaren Jackson Jr. So he's in great company when you talk about what he's able to do on both ends of the floor. Now, to Brad's point, this is not going to be the guy who takes your team to the next level. This is not delivering a championship to the city of Milwaukee. That's not going to, I believe, this is not going to keep Giannis in Milwaukee the long term. But I give it a C because it is enough to, I believe, keep him satisfied for the time being. Now, whether that's 6 months before the trade deadline, whether that's a season, whether that's 2 seasons and he sees his entire contract through, that's yet to be seen. But I believe before all of these moves, before re-signing a bunch of the guys that were already on the roster, Giannis was probably 1.5 feet out the door. And the Milwaukee Bucks just did what they needed to do to keep their man satisfied. And that's exactly what they did.
This keeps him satisfied.
For the time being. It's not a long-term fix. They kind of put a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, if you will. That's exactly what they just did.
This is not even a Band-Aid. This is
It's enough to where Giannis feels like in an Eastern Conference that's completely in disarray, that's wide open. And you're not going to have to really worry about the Celtics. You're not going to have to worry about the Pacers. Now it's the teams like Hawks, Knicks, Cavs. The 76ers probably going to be a disaster again. The Orlando Magic, they're young. They got better. You don't know what version. The East is wide open. We're not talking about the West. This is enough to keep Giannis in a space where he thinks winning a championship? No. Being a team that can be in the playoffs and maybe get out of the first round? Maybe. It's enough to keep him satisfied for the time being.
I was wondering those odds that shifted, if that is some sort of a barometer, how Giannis might feel about this, and that he might be moved. We heard Avery Johnson earlier today over on CBS Sports HQ say he thinks that Giannis could end up in Houston. Houston's already spent so much money, Brad. Is there any way that that's possible?
For who, though?
Sure, it's possible.
For who?
Well, we talked about with their trade for Kevin Durant, how they didn't have to deplete their roster. They still have plenty of valuable assets that the Bucks would.
You're going to give up Thompson and Sengun and those guys to get Giannis, who would be there longer than Kevin Durant would. Kevin Durant would be out the door. You'd still have Giannis and nobody around him.
Not nobody, but I mean, it's Giannis. If you look at, you can't trade for one of the best players in the world without giving stuff up.
I know, but
so any team that gets Giannis is going to give up a bunch of stuff.
But this is why I feel like if they were going to make that move, they should have done it before the Kevin Durant situation even happened, because the idealistic situation of the KD trade was it was such a low-risk trade. You had to give up 2 guys, 5 second-round picks, 1 pick in this past draft. It was super low risk for a player of Kevin Durant's caliber. Same thing I said to San Antonio Spurs. You could have easily gave them that second pick and got Giannis in return. I would be interested to see what a trade like the Houston Rockets would be at this stage in the game for Giannis.
Well, the point is, even if it's not the Rockets, I think the point is that this is not going to placate Giannis Antetokounmpo. I mean, I totally disagree that he's sitting back saying, oh, man, you know, I really wasn't liking this. I'm thinking I was going to leave. But now Damian Lillard's gone and we got Miles Turner. That's not going to change his equation. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it is a temporary fix to a problem that's still going to exist. It's just now, instead of it existing in July, it may exist in February. And now you got to revisit the conversation. I just think July, I think they may have simmered the situation down just a tad, and now they bought themselves maybe 6 more months to contemplate what's about to happen. It's going to happen.
Well, they weren't going to have Lillard for the upcoming season anyway, but cut him to make room for Miles Turner. We mentioned the Rockets, and Avery Johnson thinks that Giannis Antetokounmpo could join Kevin Durant in Houston. They've already done so much. I mean, Durant last week, Dorian Finney-Smith, and Clint Capella in free agency. I got to imagine, Brad, this grade is much different than the F that you gave the Bucks.
Yeah, it's an A+.
I agree.
They're nailing this thing. You got to look at annual values for these contracts, because every year is a new lens that you look at the salary cap and the luxury tax thresholds. You look at it through that year. And so they get Clint Capella on 7-year. They take Fred VanVleet down from he was in line to make $44 million this year. They get him down to a 2-year $50. That's a 25 annual value. So now they have the money to go get who? Dorian Finney-Smith, who comes in basically, if you look at the average annual value, is like a mid-level player. Very good mid-level player, and you weaken an opponent in one stroke by taking him away from the Lakers. So they have had an incredibly successful offseason. And then to Ashley's point, you get Kevin Durant without, relatively speaking,
low risk,
giving up a hell of a lot. So, you basically replace Jalen Green with Kevin Durant. You replace Dylan Brooks with Dorian Finney-Smith, and you add Clint Capella on the back end of this. If you look at from a lineup versatility standpoint, the Lakers are sitting here without a starting center. The Celtics might be here without a starting center if Horford leaves. The Rockets have 3 of them, and they can play 2 bigs with Adams and Capella. They have Şengün, an all-star, and they're all different types of bigs. Şengün is the skilled scorer. Adams is the mountain rebounder, and Capella is the rim-rolling, athletic rim protector. So they can match up with anyone, big, small, all kinds of different ways. They maintained all of their perimeter defense. They didn't lose Eason. They didn't lose Thompson. And so Durant is completely outfitted with a 2-way team that is going to be, I think, probably the best position he's been in to win a title since Golden State.
Isn't this in a lot of ways what the NBA wants? And that Houston was awful just a couple of years ago. We're coming off an NBA Finals with 2 small market teams who made it. It's not the usual suspects. Anybody can turn it around.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that the key here is you also can't stay great for long, as we're seeing with the Celtics. It gets so expensive so quickly that there's a lot of turnover. You know, you weren't that good 3 years ago. Now you're really good. And you were really good 3 years ago. Now you're not really good. The way the Celtics, it goes both ways. And the NBA has created, I think, the deepest and most equitable competitive landscape, certainly in my memory, I think, ever, where teams can now go into the offseason, and it used to be so predictable. You know, there was such a gap between the true contenders and the teams that were just sort of like fighting to be first-round appetizers. Anybody can win now. And so now you're looking at teams like the Magic and the Hawks, who you don't have to make a blockbuster deal. They just watched what the Pacers did. You can just outfit your team smartly with depth, with versatility, and you can compete. And I think Adam Silver has achieved his mission there. I think it makes it much more interesting to watch. It makes the play-in race very exciting because everybody's got a chance to win this thing. But you don't stay good for long. That's the key. You cannot plan for 4 or 5 years down the road anymore. Eventually, everybody has to get paid, and somebody's got to go. So when you've got your window, and that's why you're seeing the Rockets, and if Avery Johnson thinks Giannis is going to go there, it's because they think they've got the next 2 or 3 years. That these things don't last forever. Unless you're Oklahoma City and you have 13 draft picks between now and 2031, you can keep it going. But for the normal team, you've got like 2 to 3 year windows now, and then you reassess.
Yeah, so I didn't do an A+ because I had a teacher in high school who didn't believe in A+s. She said A is good enough. So that's what I gave the Houston Rockets. I gave them an A. I gave them an A for all of the reasons that Brad said, but specifically for a reason that I was shocked when this trade went down and it was so low risk for Kevin Durant. Obviously, all the other pieces they have made actually in free agency. Kevin Durant was not a free agent. That was a trade situation. But for me, the biggest reason why I had so much just pushback against Kevin Durant going to Houston, because I believe they were going to have to uproot their entire team to get him. The fact that they were able to just create such a low-risk situation to where there is a future after Kevin Durant retires, and we don't know when that will be. It could be 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, who knows, whenever he feels like it. Obviously, ball is life for him, so he could play another 10 years for all I know. But the fact that there is still a future for this young Houston Rockets team in a Western Conference, in a league that is constantly changing and evolving and moving. We remember what the West used to look like. It was always the Lakers. It was always the Warriors. At one point, it was the Phoenix Suns. At one point, it was the Lakers. And it was a few teams, as Brad said, that were constantly in the forefront. Now the league is constantly shifting, and in order to be in the mix, you have to not have gap years. And they're not going to have a gap year. They're going to be good now. They're going to be good 2 years from now. They're going to be good 4 years from now. And for me, that is why they get the A.
4th shortest odds to win the NBA championship. The Houston Rockets going into next season, maybe they are the 8th different champion in 8 years in the NBA. When we come back, we'll talk about the 2 winningest teams in NBA history, the Lakers and the Celtics, who both have a ton of question marks going into next season. We had 3 different NBA analysts on set yesterday when free agency began. All 3 of them believe that this is going to be LeBron's final season with the Lakers. Whether or not it's his last season in the NBA period, they were kind of split on that. At this point in the offseason, though, the Lakers have lost more than they've added to a team that couldn't even get out of the first round this past season. As we continue to give grades to teams in the first 24 hours of free agency, Chris Hassel, Mike Morgan, Ashley Nicole Moss, and Brad Botkin. When your key addition is Jake LaRavia, and then you find out Miles Turner was gettable, I guess, from Indiana, because he goes to the Bucks, and you're sitting there, you're the Lakers here with all that money, $53.5 million to LeBron, and what's the grade at this point in the offseason?
For me, it's a C, and that's only because it's unwritten. You know what I mean? Like, it's an incomplete. It's a middle-of-the-road, just incomplete situation. I think that, obviously, the center position needs to be filled. Your starting center can't be Jackson Hayes. And Brad and I keep saying this. It's not like DeAndre Ayton is the second coming of Hakeem. It's just that he is the best available center that is out there, and you need a center for Luka to be his most most productive self. And they kind of are now in a weird situation because you would expect the Pacers to now also go after DeAndre Ayton because they didn't want to go into the tax to keep Miles Turner. So now it's going to be a bidding war for DeAndre Ayton, which, no knock, I'm not going to sit up here and bash anybody in the league, but it just kind of speaks to where we are right now in terms of the market and what teams are doing, what they're willing to pay for or not pay for, that there may essentially be, when he clears waivers tomorrow, a bidding war for DeAndre Ayton. And we're going to be sitting on this set, as Brad says, really trying to hype this up, when if there were any other options out there, I mean, it's DeAndre Ayton and Al Horford. It's not like we got a lot of pickings here.
That's a big difference. If they get Horford, we can actually reassess. But I'm giving him a D right now. This would be a great segment if we could get Charles Barkley up here and do the who he play for. I would love to know if Charles Barkley has any idea who Jake LaRavia is or anything about his game. He's a good player, solid player, makes the right plays, certainly not splashy. Right now, the Lakers don't have a center. Now, we're going on what...
They do. They technically do.
And they'll have about the same one if they get DeAndre Ayton. So it's hilarious.
So you'd rather have him get Horford if you're a Laker fan?
Oh, my God. If they get Horford, I mean, Horford is still a bona fide stretch shooter, good defender. I'm hoping the Warriors get him. He helps a contending team.
To Brad's point,
significantly.
When we had this conversation earlier, it's like Jackson Hayes and DeAndre Ayton are like this, whereas Jackson Hayes and Al Horford are more like this.
They're going to call. I know I'm getting the call from the producer when Ayton signed to the Lakers. What does this mean? And I'm going to come on the set and I'm going to say nothing.
Yeah.
You got DeAndre Ayton, nothing.
He's slightly better than Jackson Hayes, though. But yeah.
The big thing for the Lakers, to me, again, Horford. Is it Horford or Ayton? That's going to change the grade a lot. And then I do think there's moves they can make. And the reason I think this is because one of the guys they were potentially saving a lot of cap space for next year was Jaren Jackson Jr. He's now signed to a 5-year, $240 million contract with the Grizzlies. Are the Lakers now going to get possibly a little bit more aggressive with some of that flexibility that we're trying to maintain for future summers? If they do, listen, Herb Jones is possibly out there off of the Pelicans, who are a dumpster fire right now on their own court. If they could get a guy like Herb Jones to solidify that spot that they just lost in Dorian Finney-Smith, and they were to sign Al Horford instead of DeAndre Ayton, there are still some moves to be made where this could be a successful offseason. But as it stands right now, they are centerless with Jake LaRavia and Dorian Finney-Smith out. D.
Jones is an elite defender.
Elite.
I'm a huge fan of his going back to his days at Alabama. I would say kind of the pink elephant in the room on this whole story with the Lakers is that you're talking about a destination franchise for years and a destination teammate in LeBron. And it doesn't seem like people are just begging to go to L.A. right now.
Yeah, well, I think that we all know that LeBron's out. And Chris started the segment with that this is no longer.
After this upcoming season?
Yeah, if it's not, we were just on, Chris went crazy on Triple Threat.
Oh, yeah. Chris Walker had a wild
Chris said he's about to go Damian Lillard buyout and he's going to be in Dallas by Tuesday. I don't think that's going to happen. But, yeah, to your point, the Lakers are now Luka's team. LeBron really, as far as what you're looking at as a potential person to join the team, you're not really looking at it like I'm joining up with LeBron anymore. That's not what it is. And so the Lakers are trying, and you can quibble with, if you think this is the right move or not, but they're planning right now for 26 and 27. They are planning to have max cap space potentially next year. Austin Reeves has a low cap hold. They're going to have to re-sign Luka, but even with those two deals, they could have max cap space next year. They certainly could have max cap space in 2027. And they have been forthright in saying that's what we're saving for. The problem is, the trend around the league, you start hoarding cap space, and then look at who's available this year.
Yeah.
There's nobody available. Josh Giddey's the third best free agent on the market right now. So saving all that cap space, when you actually currently have LeBron and Luka, listen, fans probably are like, maybe let's prioritize right now, because who's out there to join Luka in 27?
And they do feel that way. A lot of Lakers fans are like, well, we have two incredible players on our roster now. Why are we not prioritizing this season? But we were discussing this, and there's a few ways this can go. This could be LeBron's final year at the start of training camp. We're going to hear that this is his last year, and he's going to announce his retirement. It's going to be a huge goodbye tour, and we're going to be talking about it for all 82 games. And then there's a situation where this is his last ride with the Lakers, and he goes elsewhere, and he signs elsewhere to end his career, whether that's Cleveland or Miami. There's also a situation, and this is the most beneficial situation if you're the Los Angeles Lakers from a business standpoint, and that is you end up trading LeBron because listen, LeBron James, I get it, he's going to be 41 years old December 30th, and we all know what that means in terms of basketball years, but this is LeBron James, and he's still playing phenomenal basketball, sometimes better basketball than some people half his age. Let's be very clear about that. And if you don't think that you could be able to get a lot for a LeBron James trade, even at 41 years old, I know people will say, well, look what Kevin Durant went for or didn't go for. No knock to KD. This is LeBron, who has been relatively healthy his entire career and is still playing, like I said, better than people half his age. If I am the Los Angeles Lakers, you do not let him leave on his own. You trade him and try to get some value for a player of that caliber.
I agree with that. But there's a lot of sentimentality in sports, and it's like he's been with the Lakers, he's LeBron James. I agree. It feels too seismic. But if you look at it objectively, getting something for him is better than nothing.
Let's talk about another destination franchise, and that's the Boston Celtics. And they've got issues of their own. There's no Tatum next year, and as we talked about yesterday, they've been sellers. So I'm guessing the grade is not going to be good, and what can they do to enhance it?
Well, yeah, I don't know that they're going to try to do anything to enhance it. I got them at about a C because they're not just sellers because Tatum got hurt. We knew this was coming. We just talked about this last segment. You can't stay this good for this long. Everybody gets too expensive. People's contracts come up and you got to pay them, and they couldn't pay everyone. They were going to shoot past $500 million with tax ramifications. So Holiday and Porzingis, probably independent of the Tatum injury, were always on their way out. That was going to happen. Now you have the Tatum injury that concrete solidifies this is kind of a lost year. And so the question will be now, do they keep trimming salary? They got Anthony Simons, who's a good player, but in the mold of a Trae Young where you have to cover for him defensively, not a championship player. Do they flip him? Maybe into a team with some space that would be incentivized to take him, and they continue lowering their tax bill. That might be the priority for the Celtics this year. Winning might be out. I think all along this was going to be a year for them to take a step back. Even if Tatum was healthy, they were going to lose Porzingis and Holiday probably. So with Tatum out, it's a no-brainer now. This is a year of saving money, not competing.
Yeah, to Brad's point, the Celtics were always going to go through kind of a change in their team because of the new ownership, right? And we all know, I think the starting five was owed maybe $800 million and a lot of cash. And
with taxes, yeah.
With taxes and all that. So when you have Tatum, who is the focal point of your team, and I don't care what people say, oh, Tatum's not a superstar. We're not having that conversation. He is, and he matters. You lose that, you start thinking now a year ahead. And I don't think it's safe to kind of just wash this year away because, as I said, the Eastern Conference is wide open. Anything could happen. Any team can get injured. Those injuries could be catastrophic to anybody's season. But the Boston Celtics are also thinking about life after the championship and what that looks like. And I think the injury of Tatum just expedited that situation. So you saw them lose some of those pieces. I don't believe they're going to trade Jaylen Brown. I think that's a piece that is going to stay. I feel the same about Derek White. You may end up losing Al Horford. You obviously got Simons part of the team, and I think that's great. He's young. He can shoot well. Not the best defender, but can't get everything in a player. It's going to be interesting. I gave them a C+. Because they did get Simons. I think that helps them from a scoring standpoint. Tatum will return. I think he's not missing the entire season. I believe the way that the reports are circulating, he is healing at an extremely freakishly rate. I mean, he's already back in the gym.
That'd be dicey.
It'd be
For
dicey.
a lost season, probably.
It would be dicey, but depending on where they are, he may or may not return. I think the Boston Celtics are not in a limbo, but they're not quite in a rebuild. They're in a little safe pocket, little nest.
Who he play for? Xavier Tillman.
The Grizzlies.
You could tell me.
He's currently Boston's starting center.
Right. He's the guy. He is the guy who looks older than what he was. Yes.
Luke Cornett to the Spurs, Porzingis to the Hawks. You better get to know Xavier
Didn't Tillman
Tillman.
play for the Grizzlies?
6 foot, yes.
Yes, okay, that's what I was thinking.
6'7"
Yeah.
Xavier Tillman is currently.
They added Luka Garza, you know. Maybe there's a key addition.
Celtics got Luka. That's the headline.
Yeah, right.
So that's where the Celtics are at.
I'm looking at the odds to win the East right now, and the Celtics have the 5th shortest odds at 11-1.
Who's number one?
Number one is Cleveland at plus 260, then the Knicks at plus 290, then the Magic at plus 420. And that's kind of the direction we're going next, because the East is completely wide open. The Knicks have made a move. Now, they don't have a head coach yet, but they have brought in a former 6th man of the year. We'll get Ashley and Brad's thoughts on that and grades for a bunch more teams next. Back here on CBS Sports HQ Spotlight, the Knicks still don't have a head coach, but they are going to add a former 6th man of the year to their roster. Jordan Clarkson is going to be added after he was bought out from his contract in Utah, wanted to join a contender, and the Knicks are just that in the Eastern Conference as one of the favorites.
He is Chris Hassel. I am Mike Morgan. Of course, we're joined by Brad Botkin, Ashley, Nicole Moss. Giving out some grades. We're going to go fast break here, like 80s Lakers style fast break. Let's start off with the Knicks. Where do we have the Knicks right now?
B+, Jordan Clarkson, great addition. 40% from the field, 36% from the three. Averages around 17 points in 26 minutes. The scoring punch that the Knicks would need off of the bench. I gave them a B+. Why? Can anyone guess? Because they don't have a coach. That's why. And you need somebody to coach the team. So until they get a coach, B+ is where they will stay.
Yeah, incomplete for me, because Jordan Clarkson's nice, gives him some depth, but, you know, defensive concerns, he is what he is. But does give him some punch off the bench. But I'm waiting on who's going to get hired as the coach, and are they going to trade Mikal Bridges?
They're not trading Mikal Bridges.
You say that, but you
leave Mikal alone.
Miles Turner was going back to Indiana, too.
Most of us did.
I'm just saying Mikal Bridges is a possibility.
He's not
to be
going
traded.
anywhere.
So incomplete till I know if that happens.
Okay, the initials MB, big in New York, Mikal Bridges, and Mike Brown, who's the front runner right now.
Nice, Chris.
Nice.
With the Knicks. Look, the Knicks are one of 3 teams at the top in the odds, with the Cavs and the Magic to win the Eastern Conference. They traded a lot for Desmond Bane. Now they add Tyus Jones. This thing is wide open. What kind of grade would you give the Magic?
I'm also giving them a B+. I think that the Magic, although Brad doesn't really, he said it's the Eastern Conference, I still think the Magic are in a great position. This is a young team. This is a team that needed more punch from a scoring perspective. They struggle sometimes from the three-point line. That's something that Desmond Bane does not have an issue with. I do think they're a season, 2 seasons away from really being a true contender in that conversation. But this is absolutely going to be a better playoff team than they were last season. Now, everything has to do with health and availability and things like that. That was the biggest concern. Well, that was the biggest issue with Paolo being out, and then the Franz Wagner to be exact. They lost 2 of their best players due to injury. But this is a team that there's a lot of promise in Orlando. I think Magic fans should be very pleased with what the Orlando Magic have done so far.
Yeah, B+. The only reason it's not an A is because he gave up 4 picks.
A lot of picks.
For a non-All-Star. But given your situation, Desmond Bane is the perfect solution. Bottom 3 offense gives you a legitimate go-to scorer in the sense that he can create, not as a 1A player, but he can create his own offense and create for others. He's a 5 assists a game guy. He's over a 40% three-point shooter. You were a team that had to get some scoring punch. So contextually speaking, I think he was worth it. In a vacuum, you can't give up 4 picks for a non-All-Star, but contextually speaking, much like Mikal going for 5 in New York, I think it was a good move. It puts him in play in a weakened Eastern Conference.
Let's talk about the Atlanta Hawks next. 24 hours ago, we were at this desk, and everybody had high grades for the Hawks. Well, in the last 24 hours, you add Alexander Walker, you add a 40% career three-point shooter in Kennard. I would imagine the grade has only been enhanced.
Oh, my God, A+. They're acing this thing. This is a big year for Trae Young because that archetype of player is one that is becoming less and less valuable in the league in terms of, you think of your healthy Damian Lillards, think of your Jalen Brunsons, think of your Trae Youngs, your brilliant, brilliant offensive players who dominate an offense and have to be covered for defensively. That is not the type of player that most teams are after anymore. And Trae Young now has an opportunity to prove that he can play and he can be the best player on a competitive team because the Hawks have outfitted him with the type of team that he needs to be sourced with. They've got the perimeter, getting Nicole Alexander-Walker. He was one of the prized assets of this free agent class, albeit a weakened one. Putting him next to Zachary Risacher, last year's #1 overall pick. Putting him next to Dyson Daniels, a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. And the Great Barrier Thief, one of the all-time great nicknames. Jalen Johnson comes back. They're going to be able to put Onyeka Okongwu at center and put out a lineup with 4 top-tier defensive players alongside Trae Young. And all those guys can also create off the dribble secondarily off of all the gravitational pull that Trae Young has. So, short story here. Trae Young has not been in this good of an opportunity to prove that he can be the best player on a championship contending team because they have covered for every weakness that he has. They've given him the secondary playmakers, they've given him the shooters, they add Kennard in that sense, and they have given him all of the perimeter defense that he needs to be covered for. If he can't do it in this situation, and I forgot about Porzingis. They give him the stretch shooter too. You put Trae Young in the kind of space you're going to get with a pop 5. If he can't do it in this situation, we not only have to start questioning, can Trae Young be the best player on a championship team? Can any player of that archetype, can you, unless your name's Steph Curry, can you make your best player a small, defensively limited, heliocentric offensive point guard? Can you win with that player? That's a big litmus test.
Everything Brad said is spot on, but the Knicks fan in me won't let me go higher than a B+, so that's my grade.
A B+. I knew you wouldn't do an A+ because your teacher doesn't give out A+.
And I'm not giving them an A.
A B+.
Because that's what my name begins with, and I can't do that.
So you have these big name teams like the Celtics and the Lakers who aren't doing much at this point. Again, some of these smaller market teams like the Denver Nuggets doing things kind of under the radar. You bring back Bruce Brown,
now this
veteran
is an A.
minimum. You get rid of Michael Porter Jr.'s salary. And today, you send Saric out for Valanciunas.
Now, this is what I can give an A to, and I'm going to tell you why. Because the Denver Nuggets did what they needed to do to keep the big man happy, Nikola Jokic. When you have the best basketball player in the world, you don't have to do much. But the biggest thing that has kind of been the bane of the existence of the Denver Nuggets is lack of depth from that 2022 championship team. When they had Jeff Green, when they had Bruce Brown. Welcome home, Bruce Brown. Denver fans are very happy to see you. But Cam Johnson is the key here because Michael Porter Jr. was making a lot of money as the third option and didn't really contribute consistently enough that could equal the amount of money that you had to pay him. Cam Johnson is a shooter. He is a guy who can do it in motion, and that is what they need. He's also going to desperately help Jamal Murray when it comes to scoring because Jamal Murray, as we know, can struggle in the regular season and in the postseason, and he can be inconsistent himself. When you have a consistent shooter like Cam Johnson, health permitted, this is taking the Denver Nuggets to the next level and finally getting Nikola Jokic the depth that he needs that's remnant of the depth that they had when they won in 2022.
Brad also giving the Nuggets an A. Let's move on to another team kind of in that realm in the West. It feels like they've got the superstar. They can be a contender. It's the Grizzlies with Ja Morant, and it's not necessarily about maybe some of the additions they made like KCP, but what they did for the future in Jaren Jackson and Santi Aldama yesterday, Brad.
Yeah. Santi Aldama was a guy that we all kind of thought would have to be a casualty if they were going to strip enough cap space to be able to re-sign Jaren Jackson. They keep them both, and that's a big, big deal. We just talked about the Lakers possibly having max cap space next year. The guy that they were going to be targeting was Jaren Jackson, so they could not have that hanging over them all season. They secure him, and they secure Aldama on top of it, who's a really, really good player. I thought they would lose him to Detroit. And then they get Ty Jerome. Probably the best backup point guard in the league right now. This is a guy, as we saw in the playoffs last year with the Cavaliers, this is a guy that can be in your closing lineup. This is a guy that can be a crunch time player for you, not just an innings eater backup point guard. So they have had a tremendous offseason, and then they lose Bane. But here's the deal. They got 4 picks for him, and they're moving away from that roster configuration of a top-heavy, top 3 guys where they had Jackson, Bane, and Morant, and we're going to struggle moving forward, as we've talked about, to outfit them with proper depth. So they get back the flexibility that those 4 picks that they get for Bane that they can use in subsequent trades, or they can keep for cheap labor on the books as they continue to pay all these guys. They've given themselves a lot of options, and they signed Ty Jerome on top of all of it. Really, really good offseason from Memphis.
And Ashley agrees with an A there. You guys gave out a lot of A's, only 1 F. That was Brad to the Milwaukee Bucks.
Too high.
For what they he's F minus really is the grade. As we look at the odds to win the NBA championship this upcoming season, you're going to see some Eastern Conference teams up there. That's because the East is going to be a lot easier to get through. And the Cavs right now are the favorites to win the East and the third shortest odds, actually tied for the second shortest odds to win the title with the Nuggets, right behind the defending champion Thunder at plus 250.